The following podcast is being brought to you by the Defy Life Podcast Network.
Welcome to Aftergate, powered by the Defy Life Network.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is a podcast series highlighting Colgate alumni of color in their professional endeavors aftergate.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is hosted by Alvin Glimpf, aka Al, and Herman Dubois, aka Jerry.
Are y'all ready?
We are doing Aftergate because Colgate University has produced innovators who have changed the world every day, yet many alumni of color and the mainstream Colgate community are unaware of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color.
Are y'all ready? We are gathered here this morning. Welcome back to Aftergate, Season 2. It is a great morning, and we are looking forward to this conversation. Weather is beautiful, skies are blue, and this is just a special day. So without further ado, let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Herman Dubois. How are you doing, my brother?
Excellent. Happy Sunday. Great way to start the day.
Great way to start today. And actually, this is a shout out to what we are doing in our journey, right? This is definitely part of what has made 2022 just a remarkable year. And so looking forward to continuing and this show, continuing on this journey of what we are trying to accomplish. And for those who are not aware, for those who are new to the show, let me just do a quick reminder. Aftergate, it's a podcast where we are interviewing alumni of color from Colgate, some of the biggest, best, brightest, amazing alums to come across that campus and graduate. And the whole purpose, what we're trying to do is amplify what they are doing today by digging into what their life was like while they were on campus. So that's why we are here today. I think it's time to bring her into the show. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. So officially, Aftergate listeners, I would like to bring her into the room, Miss Tené Redmon, class of 2006.
Yeah.
I love the opening remarks. Let the church say amen.
Amen. Amen. And amen. Welcome.
So as Al mentioned, my name is Tené Redmon. I'm class of 2006, daughter of Sandra Allen, class of 1981, and daughter of Stephen Redmon, class of 1980. So there's a legacy there, you can see, folks.
Yes.
Definitely. So just to tell you a little bit about myself.
Hold on, time out. Wait a minute.
Already? Oh, God. I'm already in the hot seat. Am I getting questions already?
So let's back up. Let's back up.
Rewind, selector.
Rewind. Right.
Oh my gosh, here we go.
Well, right. So what we're not gonna do is you come into the podcast and just start answering the questions the way you want to answer the question. This is not a speech. This is not a presentation. This is a conversation where we're going to ask you questions and you respond. You can't come in with prepared remarks and be like, hey.
She was about to drop a PowerPoint.
I'm a Gemini, so I'm trying to structure the whole thing exactly how I want it. But I already see that I'm in a hot seat, but it's okay.
Right. Respect too. This is Aftergate. We're the host. You're the guest. So, because there's a protocol to this, there's a process to this, right? So first, before you start answering the questions you want to answer, let's just go back and we always like to just think about where did our paths initially cross. We did not go to school together. We weren't on campus at the same time, obviously. But to my recollection, we crossed paths initially through the alumni of color as they are, I guess, in the pandemic, as we're doing events, trying to engage, trying to reimagine what the Alumni of Color organization is going to look like. And so I think that's kind of how we initially start crossing paths. And I got to get a sense of the strategic mind of Tené as she offered her expertise into trying to develop what this reimagining of the Alumni of Color could look like. Does that jive with your recollection, Miss Redmon?
Absolutely. And we all know that that relationship has evolved tremendously, where you are constantly mentoring me on various items. And I appreciate your wisdom and guidance. But yes,
No
that's a
problem.
good background to our interruption.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Despite that mentoring, you've been very hesitant to become a guest on the show, but in the interim, you did supply your father as a guest. So while you might not have been a part of season 1 as a guest, you were definitely part in the backgrounds, securing your father, who was an amazing guest. His story, not just how he articulated, but who he is. Fascinating man. And so we appreciate that you were willing to support the cause, even from the background, kind of working your magic. Because Mr. Dubois, I'm sure you would agree, he was definitely an amazing conversation.
Wait until
And,
you.
and while on that, while on that note, as we mentioned earlier, first, this would be the first where we have the legacy opportunity.
Yes, it's amazing to have that community and that legacy.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, okay, if you don't mind, as the, I feel like you are co-host, having just come in with your own prepared remarks. If you don't mind, Miss Redmon, can we ask you a couple of questions? Is that all right? Maybe we can call you the producer.
Already put me in a hot seat, so I have no choice but to answer your questions. So go ahead, shoot.
It ain't get hot yet. We just actually put the sheet on.
So, okay. So let's go back. Class of 06, you graduate from high school 2002, right?
Yes.
So if you would, take us back into that time. 2002, what's the world like? What's your world like? Give us a sense of the full context so that we can get a sense of what life is like for Tené as she is thinking about Colgate, hearing about Colgate, and then entering as a freshman.
Absolutely. Where do I start? So first, it's very difficult to answer questions like this because I can barely remember what happened yesterday. But, let's see. So for some reason, one thing that comes to mind is 9/11. 9/11 occurred in my senior year of high school. And so when I think about just the overall climate, there was just a lot of political turmoil. You have the Bush administration. There's a lot of just conversations, everyone trying to make sense of the world. And I entered Colgate somewhat in that space of that political turmoil. And I think what was unique for me was having an environment where you can talk about these things. I don't think I've had that academic environment that allowed us to facilitate those conversations and really understand what's happening in the world. The other thing that I think about coming into Colgate is really around this digital era. Mm-hmm. And, it's clearly years past the digital boom or .com boom, but it's just amazing how the digital era has evolved since then. And it's nothing compared to what we have experienced. And I'm thinking about, all those days of AOL and AIM and dial-up, and wow. AIM was our Instagram, right? Or Black Planet was our social media, or things like that. And so just coming into that space and really navigating kind of these technological advances, definitely plays a part in coming to Colgate. And, the other thing that comes to mind is just, how I got to Colgate. I know my parents went there, but quite honestly, that wasn't really the driving force of coming to Colgate, ironically.
Mm.
I had every intentions of either attending Georgetown or UVA. And what was unique about my experience at Colgate, I attended like a weekend to visit the school. And I had the opportunity to stay overnight, engage with the students, and I just felt comfortable. All the other schools that I had visited required kind of like these formal presentations and formal sessions, where I had my parents there with me. And, I never had a chance to really engage with students the way I did at Colgate. And so when I had to make that difficult decision of choosing a college or school to go to, I just knew that I had to choose Colgate because I felt comfortable at Colgate. I knew that day one would be extremely comfortable. So yeah, that's how I got there.
So despite your parents graduating, there wasn't a lot of pressure in terms of, we really want you to go to Colgate.
Not at all. I almost want to say it was the opposite.
Wow.
Share a little bit about what your high school was like. I'm curious where you went to high school. What was the dynamic in your senior class? Where did you fall into all that helped sort of create a framework for where you thought you wanted to go to school and what you wanted to experience coming out of your high school?
That's a really good question. I attended Aquinas High School. Shout out to the Bronx. Unfortunately, we don't have Aquinas anymore, but they did close fairly recently. But we worked with a lot of career counselors and college counselors, and honestly, I don't recall having conversations about Colgate with my counselors. I did very well in school. Definitely was looking at our Ivy League schools. My father, my father was in the military. He was stationed for quite a bit of time in the Virginia area. I was very familiar with Georgetown. He also attended UVA at one point, so I was familiar with that campus. And so I just had my heart set on those particular schools, quite honestly. So, when I think about, the career counselors at Aquinas, Colgate just wasn't on the radar for me other than just my parents going there. And again, I can't help but to stress that when I chose to visit the school, I was looking to have a good time. I was looking to get away from home, hop on that bus, be on my own, and just have a good time for that weekend. So it was just one party for me at that point. But the rest was history after coming back and having that engagement with, the faculty and the students. And it was just amazing. It was captivating. And of course, the campus sells itself. It was beautiful. And so I just knew, again, I was going to be comfortable when I joined day one.
So was this trip up, was this the Subfrosh weekend where you're going up there with other prospective students of color, and you're being hosted by current students of color, and they're kind of giving you a sense of what life could be like?
Exactly. So, and I think that may have been one of the first trips I've ever taken where I was just on my own. I didn't go there with any friends, hopped on a bus, didn't know anyone at Colgate. So I was just really trying to engulf in the experience. And yes, it was that type of weekend. We had a lot of informational sessions and things of that nature. But when you have that one-on-one time with students, we all know it's a whole nother world at that point. So you're really able to really engulf in the real Colgate experience and go out and have fun. And, it just caught me, definitely caught my attention.
That's a consistent theme in what we've heard.
And good thing there's no video out there of just back then.
that we know of.
That you know of.
And I know.
You might want to do a search on YouTube. And
there were we didn't have phones. We had camcorders.
Definitely had camcorders.
The mini camcorders were taking over at that
Well,
time.
that's why I talked about the digital era, because it's definitely not the way it was back then. So.
I'm sorry. Talk a little bit about sort of how your transition was to Colgate. You're coming out of Aquinas. For those who don't know, it's an all-female parochial school. At least in the Bronx, Aquinas had its reputation, and I know a lot of other all-male parochial schools that, put Aquinas on its list of you got to visit the Sisters at Aquinas. It was always like get there when school's out. And I went to public school in Harlem, but I had the strategic opportunity of riding the subway, and the line that I was on and the bus line that I was on, it so happened, would allow me to engage with Aquinas students when I was in high school. But that's not Colgate. That's certainly not Hamilton. So talk a little bit about that transition, and what was that like for you once you're at Colgate now, your first year. Was it a big transition challenge? Was it a culture shock that a lot of students face, or was it different for you?
That's a good question. And yes, Aquinas girls and women are very special, definitely. So I have to put that plug in. But I have mixed ways to answer that question. So one, for some reason, this comes to mind. My father was stationed at West Point at the time. And so I'm thinking about my experiences of possibly transitioning to the area in West Point. There was a high school right outside of West Point. I spent a lot of time up there. So, yes, I'm from the Bronx, engulfed in that environment, but I would say that I had a lot of diverse experiences that I feel definitely did equip me with transitioning into Colgate. But one thing that really helped was OUS. So I know, there's so many different names out there. I don't even know what they call it today, but University Scholars Program. But I had the opportunity of coming to this summer institute. I can't remember how many weeks it may be. But essentially starting Colgate early, having the opportunity to work with faculty, take courses. But that experience really helped build some really solid, meaningful relationships that really made the transition to Colgate easier. And so that played a huge part. So having, again, those diverse experiences, but then having this transitional period definitely made things easy.
So you mentioned your father. I'm curious, once you decide I'm going to Colgate, what's the response of your parents, having been alums? And just curious to hear any advice, any excitement. What was their initial when you telling them, okay, Colgate is my choice?
Sure. Well, one thing I'm extremely grateful that I have parents that are extremely supportive. There wasn't any type of push to go to Colgate or any other institution. It was really about just what was best for me. And my parents still are very much like that, just to empower me to make these decisions. And I'm very grateful for that. And when starting Colgate, I think they shared their experiences, but it wasn't in a way where it prepped me for anything. It was more so just, just kind of for FYI purposes, but it didn't really create any type of bias coming into that place. And they just really gave the space to just cultivate my own impressions of Colgate. And I think after a while, they took a lot of pride in it. I think after a while, I think it's just natural that, when you have a child that follows in your footsteps, I think they just took pride in me choosing that option. But again, they're just super supportive of just my unique experiences at Colgate.
Cool. So when you get on campus, where you live, like what's your initial years like? What's that? Any extracurricular activities, academic transition? What's those early years like?
Yeah, so I lived at HRC, Harlem Renaissance Center. And that was another component that really made the environment comfortable. There were a lot of people that I already knew there. It was a community that just really embraced our community. And, it just allowed just the space to just engage with folks that had very similar experiences. And I was involved in a lot of activities. Shout out to SORT, Sisters of the Round Table. I have to put them number one on the list. But that group allowed me to really step into a leadership role, really talk about issues impacting women of color. We had a lot of great dialogues and volunteer efforts. I did a lot of work with, there was some volunteer efforts that we did in Syracuse, I remember at the time, a lot of the other cultural groups, so kind of like Black Student Union. I forgot there was another name for it at that time, I can't remember, but CSA, Caribbean Student Association, because I do come from a Caribbean background, so I have to definitely shout out to my Caribbean people. And I did a lot with dance, dance troops and things. So I did Total Praise. We had Kumba at the time. We had Legacy. Shout out to Nasika. Just a lot of involvement across the board that really just help us embrace our community. But it's so, again, going back to this digital era, it's just amazing. Like, I cannot find any footage of any of this. So I feel like I'm making up these stories. Like, yeah, I'm a dancer. Like, and there's like no proof of it. But I swear I was a dancer at some point. But yeah, I was just involved, just like any other student, just like, trying to find things to just engage in the community as a whole instead of just focusing solely on academics.
So when you look at that time, what do you look at as some of your accomplishments? What are the highlights of your time on campus? Things that you are proud of that we might not have digital evidence of, but we'll take your word for it.
Well, I would certainly say SWORD. I started off the conversation with SWORD. It was just so important just to build that community with women of color and, to have sometimes tough conversations of the challenges that, women of color tend to face. It really help prepare for the world and just unite, around a common goal and mission. And so I think that was one of my biggest accomplishments, quite honestly.
Any traveling abroad at all?
I did, yes. So I went to UWI, University of the West Indies in Trinidad. So I had the opportunity to see Trinidad and Tobago. That was an amazing experience. I studied, political science and government, and a lot of work around sociology and anthropology. I think we studied festivals, and at that time there was a lot of different festivals happening in Trinidad. We had like Diwali. We got to just attend just different ceremonies. But that was a great experience at Colgate. But I think that was one of the only places that I may have went while I was there.
So this is why, if there are students who are listening, this is where you can pick up nuggets of information that will make your experience at Colgate so much better. Who knew there was this thing called studying of festivals? So like that, I could have went somewhere and studied carnival. Like the idea that Colgate will allow you to travel to another country to study a festival.
So it's funny because
Beautiful world,
I just wanted to go there and have fun and party, to be honest with you. My family comes from Montserrat, which is right outside of Antigua. And so, of course, just growing up, I've always been involved in festivals and things of that nature. So I had to join the study abroad opportunity, but ironically, it wasn't a party, right? Like there was real work that needed to be done. It was probably some of the hardest courses I had to take at UWI, to be honest with you. It might have been even my lowest grades that I got at Colgate. But the experience was invaluable. So I was able to study government, but then yes, there was that opportunity to study festivals, and we had the opportunity to meet different calypsonians, soca artists. It wasn't just part of just being in the book studying festivals. We got to meet people that did the work and influence their communities. We got to do some very raw, anthropology work where we were able to get engulfed in some like real religious ceremonies. And, it was amazing to have that opportunity. So yes, I definitely encourage students to make use of those opportunities.
And listen, we all had our share of stories of getting, below grades that we maybe would have expected to achieve, but ain't none of us had that happen. I'll tell you that right now. I don't get some low grades.
It's the setup. They're like, take this course around festivals, or take this course on hip hop.
Matter of fact, I'm gonna have to take it twice.
It's a setup.
So on that note, we're gonna take a pause so that we can take a break for our sponsor, and we'll
Okay,
come back and finish this conversation with Tené.
sounds good.
So, this episode is sponsored by Hope Murals. Hope Murals is a nonprofit that provides adolescent youth with an interactive experience of creative expression via an urban arts platform that stimulates both mental and physical development. Please visit their website at www.hopemurals.org to learn more and find ways you can support the work they do.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to the second half of the conversation with Tené. It's been fascinating so far. Looking forward to hearing more about what you have going on currently. But looking back has been just kind of cool, right? But before we jump in, let's make sure we thank our sponsor, Hope Murals. We always appreciate your sponsorship. We appreciate what you're doing in this community as you will continue to expose our youth to urban arts and just helping them with development of their character, of their dreams, helping them really see a future, but through the medium of art. So appreciate that. And definitely check out their website, hopemurals.org. Check out their social media at Hope Murals. You'll be fascinated to learn what they got going on over the last few months and what they got going on in the future. If you too are interested in being a sponsor, shout us out, aftergatepodcast@gmail.com. And make sure you also show some love to our network, the Defy Life Network at godefylife.com. You can see more interesting, empowering, and written content, other ways to promote what you got going on. And they have a podcast hub where you can find Aftergate. So check out their podcast hub at defylifepods.com. That being said, as we jump into the second half of this interview, I'm going to pass the mic to my co-host so he can take it from here.
So we have the illustrious Sister Redmon on, and got to hear about sort of her journey to Colgate, and we look forward to hearing a little bit more about her journey through and post Colgate. But before we go there, I have a particular soft spot in my heart as a young man who was in the decade that associated itself with the birth of hip hop, coming out of the Bronx, and then trying to understand how, not even having a clue at how hip hop would be such an influence in my life and shaping my trajectory both personally and professionally. And then having opportunities to work with Brother Al and be a student at Colgate and being introduced to Nice Light and Al having his the Al Love radio show, and then We Funk and all of that, just having no idea where hip hop would go then to where it is now. But I have to say, I find myself desiring more from hip hop. I found myself, as much as it is a $billion industry, it has clearly reached ends of the world that nobody would have thought possible back in the 80s and 90s. In a tumultuous time that we live in, with so much controversy going on, both internationally and right here in our backyard in the U.S., I yearn for artists, particularly artists in the hip hop world, to use their platform in a constructive way, in a manner that has impact and makes changes in our communities, in our policies, and how we go about truly changing the game. Because we clearly changed the game. Hip hop has definitely changed the game into the corporate world. But I think in some instances we lose a little bit about what the roots of hip hop, where they've come from, and what they stood for. The art of storytelling. We always talked about not having a platform and not having the influence. And now we got both. We got the platform and the financial influence to really leverage it. Yeah, but some of it is people don't know about it, but then some of it is like, should hip hop be doing more? And what does that more look like? Is it involving community development? Is it involving study abroad programs? Is it involving opportunities to teach the art of hip hop from a school education perspective, where when you have a music class, just like we had the history of jazz, the history of hip hop in an elementary school, in a middle school, where it's age appropriate, where music is played, and the elements are brought into an academic setting that allows the young people to see it from an interdisciplinary perspective and really embrace it beyond just TikTok videos. And I love your perspective, Mr. Redmon, on sort of where you see hip hop now, and what's your vision for the role that hip hop plays in our society, in our community, and impacting our generations to come.
Sure. So, one thing that I think is very important is to understand that hip hop influences people in very unique ways. And I'm starting off by saying that simply because I originally joined an advisory board for the Universal Hip Hop Museum. And when I introduced myself to the executive director, I was a bit hesitant. I felt that I wasn't connected enough to the hip hop culture. I didn't know enough about hip hop. And somehow, some way, I discredited all of my experiences with the hip hop community. I couldn't, even the question you're asking me right now, I'm stumbling on, okay, well, what do I need to say that's so profound about hip hop culture and how it has evolved? And, is he going to ask me questions about who my favorite artists are and rap a few lyrics? I can't do that for you. I could try, but I can't. But it was important to understand how hip hop influences so many areas of our lives and our marginalized communities. And as a Bronx native, this was a project that I joined to tell that story of how it's connected to people and their unique experiences. And so, when I think about the work for this particular museum, it's touching on these multiple areas of hip hop. We see our MCs, our DJing, we see, the art form that's, around graffiti art, breakdancing. There's just so much that's baked into the culture of hip hop. And so as I see it evolving, I see us as a people celebrating just this multifaceted, component of hip hop. We're celebrating it. We're celebrating unique experiences. We're celebrating how it's turned into this global phenomena. And we're celebrating that we can just be ourselves. There's a level of authenticity that is tied to hip hop. And I think that is what's most important to telling that story.
Fantastic. Thank you. As as fellow hip hop heads in this interview, it is awesome to hear the work and looking forward to hearing more about it as we continue in this conversation. But before we get there, as you talk about what you're doing with the museum and how it's playing a role in community development and lifting up the culture of hip hop and the impact it's had and will continue to have, can you walk us through your journey of graduating Colgate to becoming who you are now? So give us a sense from graduation till now. What were some of those highlights, pit stops to get to where you are right now?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I would say, I have spent the last 20 years in the financial services industry. And I'm bringing this up simply because I landed my first job out of Colgate through a Colgate connection. Shout out to Nicole Freeman. She was very instrumental in talent acquisition at Bank of America at the time. I spent a little over 13 years at Bank of America, and it all birthed out of a relationship with a Colgate alum, and that's huge.
Yep.
And that is important for us to have that community, support one another, and really help our careers evolve. And I've had various roles in financial services. Currently, I work at Citi, a lot of work in strategy and planning. But one thing that Colgate has taught me, as well as my different roles in financial services, is that it comes full circle to service and community. And so I made a personal choice to invest more of that, more of my time really in that space of volunteering and in the community. I don't do it full time, but I certainly make sure that I make that a priority, which is part of the reason why I participate in events and efforts such as Junior Achievement in the Universal Hip Hop Museum.
So, when you left Colgate, did you envision finances as your future, or how did you land in terms of that being your focus?
I think just like any other student, you're just looking for a job. I don't come from a family that does a lot of work in financial services. My mother works for children, for administration of children's services. My father was a JAG officer in the Army. And so there wasn't really a lot of focus in financial services, but it really had a lot to do with just that Colgate connection. So having that conversation with Nicole and others, I found an interest in financial services. And at that time, it was actually a leadership program. So I think that was actually what I was most attracted to, was really just that component of being a leader, and having those, having that skill set was most important to me, quite honestly, more than just having a background in finance. And in fact, a lot of my jobs have always been around being a people leader, empowering people, empowering efforts within the community, and just really standing as kind of this transformational leader. So it was more about that than actually, having a background in finance. And again, I have to give credit to Colgate really setting that up for me.
Fantastic. And I'm glad you did mention that, because that is a huge part of why we are talking with our alums. This whole medium of Aftergate is this idea to lift up those relationships as they have helped throughout people's past, but also just reinforce this idea that they're more to leverage, and that we have this powerful network of folks that are doing some amazing things around the world. And we want to make sure we are connecting and leveraging that resource and this network so that we all can just really help each other and support each other as necessary, where there's synergy and alignment. So I also want to take the time to talk a little bit about the museum, right? So I want to give you a chance to, for those who don't know that this museum exists, give a sense of what it is and where it is in its journey, and even talk about where it's going.
Absolutely. So the Universal Hip Hop Museum is set to open its doors in 2024. So right now, the exhibit of the museum has focused on just really showcasing this project. There's been a few exhibits that have opened. There's been some press releases that we put out there, but essentially we're looking to just celebrate and preserve hip hop culture. And as I mentioned earlier, there's just so many components that are connected to hip hop culture, and everyone has a different story. And so this museum is giving that space to tell that story, celebrate, what was birthed out of a marginalized community, and really just stand as as a mark in our community that's just helping bring people together and just have those influences. So it's just amazing what we're building out. I had the opportunity to actually engage the museum to participate in some Colgate events, because I am working to gain some visibility for them. So they are going to participate in our reunion weekend on June 10th. I hope folks are going to check that out. But right now, we're just looking to bring that visibility to this project, celebrate hip hop culture, and it's just going to be a movement, just like we saw when hip hop was birthed. It's truly just going to be a movement, what we're going to do in this space.
So what I do appreciate about this project is that it's bigger than just preserving the culture, but there's also a community economic development part of it, right? So that's, to me, is powerful, because that was always part of what hip hop was about. It was about giving people a voice, an opportunity to share their experiences, but it was also their this movement, this culture was about developing this community in a positive way. So I appreciate that this initiative is gonna assist the Bronx in becoming a better place, and I hope that it has an impact on changing lives as well.
And that's
And, you know,
a huge component. I was just going to mention that it is going to be located in Bronx Point. That's a major development that's occurring. It's not too far, BX, stand up, right? It's not too far from Yankee Stadium, but it's just a multi-billion-dollar investment that New York City is making on its waterfront. So there's going to be open spaces. You have educational, facilities and parks and recreation. And most importantly, affordable housing in that area as well. And so it's just an amazing project and staple of our community. And that's hip hop. Hip hop is not just music. That is hip hop. That advancement and development, that is hip hop.
excellent, excellent. And I'm ecstatic as not only a hip hop sort of, I look at myself as a not only advocate, but somebody who is a living testimony of the impact that hip hop has had, and also coming from the Bronx and knowing Hunts Point very well. I'm ecstatic about overwhelming opportunities and resources that are going to come to that community that has always been deprived, and unfortunately, when I was growing up, was not where they wanted to be in. I'm hopeful that they stay true to the mission and the vision of investing in Hunts Point, and not in a gentrification type of way, but in a true community development type of way. And if hip hop is true to the game, they won't let that happen. So definitely want to talk to you more off camera about some of the network of folks I have up in New York who are still true to the hip hop world and are active in leadership roles in New York City that I think would be very interested in getting involved and helping with some of that exposure you're talking about. So we'll talk about
Yeah.
that. Thank you. Excellent. Now, I don't want to make any assumptions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's important just to continue to remember how hip hop is a global phenomenon. And so even though we're building this project out in the Bronx, I can't help but just think about how it spreads globally. And, I keep saying, I'm from the Bronx. I grew up in Mount Haven, right on Willis Avenue. And I moved uptown. Yes, exactly. Then moved uptown to Gun Hill and Boston Road area. But then when I look at this project, okay, yes, it's in the South Bronx, but there's projects that we're doing throughout the country, throughout the world, to really celebrate this global phenomena. And so that's this museum experience is just going to mirror exactly what we've seen from hip hop, from when it started.
Well, on that note, and I'm sure I would be down when y'all start thinking about annexes and satellite programming around the country. Atlanta and Miami is prime and ready because it gives us a chance to, ring the bell locally in a way that I think that, and don't get me wrong, the Dirty South has its own place in hip hop history, but it's always nice to, remind them where it all started from.
Well, I'm recruiting you. I'm recruiting you. We putting you on the payroll. Well, there's no money. I'm not giving you any payroll.
Be careful what you ask for.
Strike that line where payroll. But yes,
delete that from record.
But
we
need folks.
Blessings and compensation come in a lot of ways. So.
I want to hear it. What does hip hop mean to you? Again, it touches everyone's life, and so I want to see everyone on board with this project and express what hip hop means to you. When we were talking about just economic advancement, Microsoft is one of our biggest sponsors, primary technology sponsor in this. They donated over $5 million to this project. A lot of work around artificial intelligence and just a lot of technological resources that were pumped into this project. And so the museum it's much more than just kind of this music component, right? There's so many elements to hip hop. And so we're seeing programs that are focused on STEM. There's just programs just focused on things that you would not even associate with hip hop. There's obviously been a lot of things happening in our community around gun violence. The museum has stepped in to talk through, some of these challenges that we're seeing in our neighborhoods. There's been recent events in the news that we've heard, around just devastation sometimes in the Bronx or in other communities. And the museum steps in to donate or gather resources to support things that are happening. So it's just this continuous movement of supporting one another and building community and building these meaningful relationships. That is hip hop, not just the music, but the entire culture that really pulls us together as a community.
You alluded to it. I don't know if there were any sort of gaps. It's rare to actually have at this time in our society where you meet a person professionally who has had as long a stint as you have with an employer. Like a lot of folks are moving around in that pursuit of advancement. They end up having to move into different employment situations to advance careers. You seem to have had some success. In case there were any gaps, so we'd love for you to talk a little bit about, sort of, I mean, you mentioned who you are now, but when you leave Colgate in '06, sort of, what are some of those, if there weren't any steps missed, or did you jump right in that leadership program? Were there some other opportunities that you did?
So that's a good question. I'm going to say I probably would have did the same thing I'm doing now. I mean, how could I say that I would have taken a different path if I'm still taking the same path right now, right? When I leave a job and I'm looking for that next opportunity, guess what? I'm going back into financial services. I'm going back into a leadership role. So, that's what's so interesting about life, is that, you're constantly growing, learning, developing. And so, the spirit moves you to take on different opportunities. So, coming out of Colgate and where I am now, yes, I'm still very much interested in financial services, but there's a burning desire to still serve the community. And ironically, it's not something that I want to do full time. And part of the reason why is because for me at least, it takes away somewhat of the fun and the authenticity for me. And this is, I know everyone has a different story, but when I support the community outside of my professional environment, it allows me the space to just genuinely support that particular project. There's nothing I'm getting out of it. And I like to protect that space, quite honestly. It provides a different level of integrity in those efforts. And that's just a choice that I've made over the years.
Great perspective. So here we are near the end. One, I would like you to share the website for the museum so that folks can learn more, find ways to support. But also, if there was any other initiative, anything you'd like to promote, just here's your opportunity, a platform, because we really, again, want to use this opportunity for our AOC, the Aftergate Network, to really rally and support.
So for more information about the Universal Hip Hop Museum, people can check out their website at uhhm.org. Again, uhhm.org. I highly encourage people to sign up for their newsletters, follow them on social media, UHHM, Universal Hip Hop Museum, but essentially just get involved in the project somehow, some way. Just know what's happening. If you're able to contribute, by all means, donate. But the museum needs the support, and I cannot stress enough that hip hop affects everyone. That is a true statement, and I hope people really gravitate towards this project. As we close out, the only thing I just want to say to people is, one of my favorite quotes from Gandhi is, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And that is what is extremely important to me. And I hope other people find it important for them as well. But that is ultimately the best way that we can serve a higher power is in service to others. And so that's what's most important to me with this project, with the Universal Hip Hop Museum, and just what's important to me with any community and efforts that I support. So that's it, really.
Yes. So before we wrap up officially, let me just say, while we joke about, you not wanting to come on Aftergate until now, it is a testament that everything happens in the right season and the right reason, and that today was the day we were supposed to do this interview. It is just a affirmation of why we are doing this, because it is an opportunity for an alum who has an amazing history in terms of the legacy side of it, but also to talk about who you are, your experience, and the amazing thing you're doing on your own right. And as three Colgate alums who hip hop is dear to their heart, and dear to our experience, right? It's had its own impact on who we are as professionals, but in who we are personally. It is just fascinating to hear what you're doing and what the museum is doing, and on the potentially where we're going with this. So that's just been great to hear, great to share. So please, after Gate, make sure you show some love and get on that website, find out more, get on their social media, find out what they're doing, because this was definitely a conversation worth having. So thank you.
Excellent. That is hip hop.
Shout out to hip
Oh,
hop.
don't you don't want me to start rapping now? I mean, I used to be on Ed Lover and Dr. Dre, the morning show. Come on,
drop a verse.
What you gotta say? Who's on the phone with Ed, Lisa, and Dre?
Whoa, that's what we talk about.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. So on that note, this has been another episode of After Gate Season 2. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our listeners. Always, always, always remember, After Gate is powered by the Defy Live Network. So make sure you check out us and other of their dope podcasts in the future on all your favorite streaming platforms. All right, because we got many dope episodes to follow. And as this is the episode before reunion, shout out to all those traveling. Be safe on them roads. Make sure we have a good time. Also, remember, the Colgate you knew is not the Colgate of today, and it's definitely not the Colgate of the future, because that's what we're trying to build as we heal together. Peace, family.
Thank you.
Shh. You hear that? Listen closer. That, my friend, is the deafening sound of focus. It drowns out all the useless noise that can clutter the moment. Naysayers don't exist. Haters? Smaters? The peanut gallery? Who's that? When you in your zone, all that noise and all that buzz is just elevator music. So, enjoy your journey, focus on your goal, and bask in the quiet roar that is progress. Because when it's your time to shoot that shot, spit that verse, or close that deal, the only voice that matters is yours. Defy life.